After 3 years of marriage, a millionaire divorced her, but her second husband found her virgin. Welcome to Alcot Stories. Hey there, amazing viewers. Welcome to Alcot Stories, your go-to place for captivating love stories filled with romance, passion, twists, and deep emotions. We believe that every love story is special, and here we bring you unforgettable tales that will touch your heart, make you feel every emotion, and leave you craving for more. If you enjoy heartwarming romance, dramatic twists, and powerful endings, then you're in the perfect place. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe to Alcot Stories. And don't forget to hit the bell icon so you never miss a new story. We'd love to hear from you. What kind of love stories inspire you the most? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for being part of the Alcot Stories family, where every story is crafted with love, emotion, and a touch of magic. Love. The grand ballroom of the luxurious five-star hotel was adorned with cascading white roses and twinkling crystal chandeliers. The air was filled with the soft melody of a violin, playing the most romantic tune as guests turned their heads toward the grand staircase. The moment everyone had been waiting for had arrived. Isabella, a breathtakingly beautiful brown-skinned woman, stepped onto the marble floor, her delicate fingers clutching the bouquet of red and white roses. She was a vision in an elegant, shimmering white gown, its intricate lace hugging her curves perfectly. A diamond-studded tiara rested on her silky dark hair, complementing her radiant beauty. Her deep brown eyes sparkled with a mixture of joy and nervousness as they locked onto the man waiting for her at the altar. Liam Montgomery, a powerful and impossibly handsome white millionaire, stood at the other end of the aisle, dressed in an expensive black tuxedo. His chiseled jawline, piercing blue eyes, and well-built physique made him look like a prince from a fairy tale. As he gazed at Isabella walking toward him, a confident smile played on his lips. Guests whispered among themselves about the contrast between them, his ivory complexion against her warm brown skin, but none could deny the undeniable chemistry between them. As Isabella reached the altar, Liam extended his hand, his fingers wrapped around hers, firm yet gentle. He leaned closer, whispering, "You look absolutely breathtaking, my love." A soft blush crept onto Isabella's cheeks. "And you look like a dream, Liam," she whispered back, her heart pounding. The priest began the ceremony, his voice echoing through the vast hall. "We are gathered here today to witness the union of two souls in love." Liam squeezed Isabella's hand reassuringly. His expression was sincere, full of love and devotion. She felt safe, cherished, and deeply in love with him. "Do you, Liam Montgomery, take Isabella Carter to be your lawfully wedded wife?" Liam's eyes never wavered from hers. "I do. I promise to love, cherish, and protect her for all eternity." A tear of happiness escaped Isabella's eye. "And do you, Isabella Carter, take Liam Montgomery to be your lawfully wedded husband?" Her voice trembled slightly, but her heart knew the answer. "I do, with all my heart." "You may now kiss the bride." Liam cupped her face tenderly, leaning in as their lips met in a deep, passionate kiss. The guests erupted in applause, but for Isabella, the world disappeared. It was just her and Liam, lost in their love. A honeymoon in Paris. The city of love days. Later, they arrived in Paris, the city of love. Liam had arranged for a private penthouse suite overlooking the Eiffel Tower. As they stepped onto the balcony, the glittering lights of the city spread before them like a dream. "Do you like it?" Liam asked, wrapping his arms around her waist from behind. Isabella leaned into his warmth. "I love it. This is beyond anything I ever imagined." That night he took her to a candlelit dinner on a private yacht cruising along the Seine River. The Eiffel Tower shimmered in the distance as they sipped on fine champagne. "To us," Liam toasted, his blue eyes locked onto hers. "To a lifetime of happiness," Isabella replied, clinking her glass against his. Liam took her hand and led her to the dance floor. The soft melody of a romantic tune played as they swayed in each other's arms. "I will always love you, Isabella," he murmured, pressing a kiss against her forehead. Later, in their lavish suite, Liam gently lifted Isabella into his arms, carrying her to their king-sized bed covered in rose petals. Their lips met in a slow, intoxicating kiss as he whispered against her skin, "Tonight, I will make you feel like the most loved woman in the world." Isabella's heart pounded as his hands traced gentle patterns along her arms. But despite the romance, despite the passion in his eyes, she had no idea that the promises he made tonight would soon be shattered. The golden days of their honeymoon felt like a distant dream. The soft caresses, the whispered promises under the Parisian moonlight, and the endless romantic gestures had started to fade. At first, Isabella brushed it off as post-honeymoon exhaustion. After all, Liam was a powerful businessman. His schedule was demanding, and he had an empire to run. She convinced herself that things would go back to normal once they settled into their married life, but days turned into weeks, and the warmth that once defined their love began to wither. The first signs of change. It started subtly. Liam would come home later than usual, offering excuses about important meetings and last-minute deals. "I'm sorry, sweetheart, work ran late again." "I have a business dinner tonight, don't wait up for me." "I'm exhausted, Isabella. Let's talk in the morning." At first she believed him. She prepared his favorite dinners, only for them to grow cold on the dining table as she sat alone, staring at the flickering candlelight. The house, which once echoed with laughter and love, now felt eerily quiet. The distance between them grows. Isabella noticed the small changes in him. The way he used to wrap his arms around her in bed. Gone. The way he used to kiss her forehead before leaving for work. A thing of the past. The way his eyes once lit up when he saw her. Diminished into mere glances. One evening, she decided to surprise him. She dressed in a stunning red satin dress, the one he had once told her made her look irresistible. She set up a candlelight dinner, the table adorned with rose petals. The aroma of his favorite dish filled the air. She waited and waited, but he never came. Hours later, the front door finally creaked open. Liam walked in, his tie loosened, his hair slightly disheveled. The faint scent of an unfamiliar perfume clung to his expensive suit. "You're late," Isabella said softly, trying not to let the hurt show in her voice. Liam barely spared her a glance. "I told you I had a late meeting." She forced a smile. "I made dinner for us." His gaze flickered toward the untouched plates on the table. With a sigh, he rubbed his temples. "I already ate." Her heart sank, but she swallowed her pain. "Liam, we haven't spent time together in so long." Instead of the gentle husband she had once known, Liam responded coldly. "Isabella, I'm tired. I need to rest." Without another word, he walked past her, leaving her standing alone in the dimly lit room, her heart breaking a little more. A wife's silent suffering. Night after night, it was the same. Liam would come home late, the scent of another woman's perfume lingering on his clothes. Isabella never questioned him. She wanted to believe that love could fix this. "He loves me. He's just stressed. Maybe I need to be more patient. Maybe I'm not enough." But deep down, doubt started creeping in. She started noticing things, lipstick stains on his collar, shades she never wore. The way his phone never left his hand, the constant buzzing of messages he never let her see, the distant look in his eyes as if he was somewhere else, even when he was home. One night, as she lay in bed, pretending to be asleep, she heard him whisper on the phone in the adjacent room, "Yeah, I miss you too. I'll see you tomorrow night, same place." Her blood ran cold. Tears silently streamed down her face as she realized the truth. Liam wasn't just drifting away. He was already gone, holding on to hope. Despite everything, Isabella still held on to hope. She prayed, she cried, she convinced herself that this was just a phase. Maybe if I love him harder, he'll come back to me. So, she continued to smile. She continued to wait for him every night. She continued to believe in a love that was slowly slipping through her fingers. But little did she know, the worst was yet to come. The days grew longer, and the nights colder. Liam's excuses became routine. Meetings that never seemed to end, late-night calls he always answered in private, and the distant glances he gave her when he did return home. Isabella could no longer deny what was happening, though she fought to keep the illusion of their perfect marriage alive. Each time Liam came home late, the faint smell of perfume clung to his expensive clothes. It wasn't Isabella's fragrance. She wore a light floral scent that had once been his favorite. The perfume on him now was heavy, almost sickly sweet, and it filled the house, suffocating her with its reminder of his infidelity. She had once been the woman to greet him at the door, eager to embrace him and kiss him goodnight. Now, she stood in silence, waiting for him to enter, unsure if she wanted to know what he had been doing outside their home. But her love for him was still there, and she wanted to believe the best in him. "I'm sorry I'm late," he'd say when he walked through the door, his voice tired, but it lacked the warmth it once had. Isabella would look up from whatever she was doing, her heart heavy with unspoken questions. He would drop his briefcase, give her a perfunctory kiss on the cheek, and disappear into the bathroom. She would listen as the shower ran, the sound of water masking the silence between them. It was a routine, a cruel dance that was killing her inside. One evening, after another long day, Isabella lay in bed staring at the ceiling. She had been up since early morning, cleaning, organizing, cooking. Liam had promised they would spend time together that night, but it was already past midnight, and he had yet to return. The house was silent, the shadows of the night pressing down on her like a weight. Her eyes were heavy with exhaustion, but she refused to sleep. She knew, deep down, that something was wrong, something she could no longer ignore. She had stayed awake countless nights, waiting for him to come home, hoping, praying that maybe this time he would show her the love he once had. But tonight was different. Her heart raced when she heard the sound of the front door creak open. She sat up slowly, holding her breath. Liam's voice echoed from the hallway as he spoke softly into his phone. She couldn't make out the words, but the tone was unmistakable, a flirtatious tone, one that made her blood run cold. "I'll be there soon, babe," Liam said in a hushed voice, his words full of that familiar affection that once belonged to her alone. Her chest tightened, and she instinctively slid out of bed, moving silently down the hallway. She crept closer to the living room, her feet barely making a sound on the soft carpet. As she rounded the corner, she froze. Liam stood in front of the mirror, removing his jacket. His shirt was slightly untucked, and he reached for a fresh shirt in his closet. But what caught her eye wasn't his disheveled appearance. It was the red lipstick stain on his collar, the unmistakable mark of another woman. Her breath caught in her throat. The familiar, sickening twist of betrayal knotted in her stomach. Slowly, She backed away, not wanting him to see her yet. She stepped into the shadows, heart pounding, unable to breathe as the weight of what she had just seen crushed her. "Isabella, are you awake?" Liam's voice echoed from the hallway. He sounded tired, but there was a sharp edge to his words that made her blood run cold. She held her breath, waiting, hoping he would leave her alone. But he entered their bedroom a moment later, the faint scent of unfamiliar perfume clinging to his skin, mingling with the sharp, bitter scent of whiskey on his breath. He looked at her, his expression unreadable. "What's wrong?" he asked casually, as though nothing had changed. Isabella couldn't bring herself to look at him. Her eyes were fixed on the red lipstick on his collar, the silent accusation hanging in the air. She felt her heart breaking as every lie she had convinced herself to believe collapsed. "Who is she, Liam?" The words left her lips before she could stop them. The question had been building up for months, but now it escaped in a rush of pent-up emotion. Liam's face hardened and he stepped back, his eyes narrowing with irritation. "Isabella, I told you it's work. Why can't you just trust me?" His tone was sharp, defensive. Isabella stood up from the bed, her hands trembling. She reached out, grabbing his collar and pulling him toward her. The red lipstick stain was right in front of her face, mocking her, reminding her that he had been with someone else, someone who was not her. "Don't lie to me, Liam. Don't you dare," she whispered, her voice shaking. Liam pulled away roughly, a cold smirk on his face. "Isabella, I'm done with this. Don't wait up for me anymore." He turned away, the harshness of his words slicing through her like a knife. Her eyes filled with tears as she watched him walk out of their bedroom, his footsteps growing fainter as he left her behind. The door slammed shut with a finality that sent a shiver down her spine. She stood there, motionless as the reality of his betrayal sank in. "Don't wait up for me anymore." The words echoed in her mind, repeating over and over again. She had waited for him for so long, but now she realized that waiting for a man who no longer cared was pointless. In the darkness of that room, Isabella finally allowed herself to cry. But even as the tears fell, she couldn't shake the feeling that her world had just been shattered by the man she had once trusted with her heart. The dining table was set beautifully, fine china plates, crystal wine glasses, and a flickering candle in the center, casting a warm glow over the carefully prepared dishes. The aroma of roasted lamb and freshly baked bread filled the air. It was Liam's favorite meal. Isabella sat at the table, her hands clasped together as she glanced at the clock. 9 p.m. He was late. Again. She had spent hours preparing this dinner, hoping, praying that tonight would be different, that Liam would walk through the door, see her effort, and realize how much she loved him. Maybe he would smile like he used to, pull her into his arms, and whisper sweet words into her ear. Maybe they could go back to the way things used to be. But as the minutes ticked by, hope started to fade. 10 p.m. The food was getting cold. The candle had melted down to half its size. Isabella stared at her untouched plate, her chest tightening. She had tried everything, waiting up for him, dressing beautifully, making his favorite meals, keeping the house perfect, but nothing seemed to bring him back to her. 11:30 p.m. The front door finally opened. Liam walked in, looking effortlessly charming in his navy blue suit, but his tie was slightly undone, and the scent of expensive perfume clung to his clothes. Not her perfume. The painful truth had never been more obvious. Isabella stood up, gathering her courage. She wasn't going to remain silent tonight. "Liam," she said, her voice soft yet firm, "why are you doing this to me?" Liam let out a tired sigh, rubbing his temples as though her question was an inconvenience. "Isabella, not tonight. I'm exhausted." Her hands clenched into fists. "Number, I won't stay silent anymore. I need to know. What did I do wrong? Why are you treating me like this?" Liam exhaled sharply, finally looking at her. There was no affection in his eyes, only irritation, and then, with chilling coldness, he said the words that shattered her world. "You don't match me, Isabella. You're brown-skinned. Our kids will never be white like me." Silence. The air was sucked from the room, the weight of his words crashing down on her like a tidal wave. Isabella blinked, her breath caught in her throat. Had she heard him correctly? She felt her heart crack, piece by piece, as his words echoed in her mind. "You don't match me. Our kids will never be white like me." Tears welled up in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "Liam, we had a love marriage. Where is our love?" Liam scoffed, running a hand through his perfect blonde hair. "Love." He let out a hollow laugh. "Isabella, don't be naive. People like me, people of my status, my class, we don't marry women like you. I was blinded at first, but now I see the truth. We never should have happened." Her whole body trembled. "You're saying our entire marriage was a mistake?" Liam didn't hesitate. "Yes." The world around her blurred as the pain inside her grew unbearable. She had loved him with all her heart. She had believed in him, in their marriage. She had waited for him, forgiven him, endured his coldness, hoping that deep down he still loved her. But he never did. She had been living in an illusion. A bitter tear slid down her cheek. "So that's it? You're done with me because of my skin color, because you think I don't match your perfect world?" Liam gave a careless shrug. "I need someone who complements my status, my family's legacy. And you don't." Isabella felt something inside her break, not just her heart, but the last shred of love she had left for him. For so long she had believed their love was real. She had convinced herself that the man she fell in love with still existed somewhere inside Liam. But now, staring at him, the man who once made promises under the stars, who kissed her with such passion on their honeymoon, who told her she was his forever, she realized something. That Liam was gone. Or maybe he had never truly existed. A deep silence stretched between them before Isabella straightened her spine, wiping her tears. Her voice was steady when she spoke. "Then let me make this easy for you, Liam." She walked to the closet, pulled out her suitcase, and placed it on the bed. Liam frowned. "What are you doing?" She met his gaze, her eyes burning with quiet strength. "Leaving." For the first time, Liam looked taken aback. "Isabella, don't be dramatic." She let out a small, bitter laugh. "Dramatic? You just told me I was a mistake, that I don't match your perfect white world. What's left for me here?" Liam opened his mouth, but no words came out. Maybe he expected her to beg, to cry, to try and hold on to him like she had so many times before. But not this time. Isabella zipped up her suitcase and grabbed her purse. She paused at the doorway, glancing at him one last time. "You don't deserve my love, Liam." Then, without another word, she walked out. And for the first time in 3 years she felt free. But she had no idea that life had something extraordinary waiting for her just around the corner. The sun had barely risen, casting a dull grey light through the bedroom window. The silence in the house was suffocating. Isabella sat on the edge of the bed, her eyes swollen from crying all night. Her suitcase was packed, but she hadn't moved. She had spent hours replaying Liam's cruel words in her head, hoping that maybe, just maybe, he would come to his senses. Maybe he would apologize. Maybe he would realize how deeply he had hurt her. Maybe he would beg her to stay. But deep down, she knew the truth. Love did not live in this house anymore. A sharp knock on the door broke her thoughts. She looked up, heart pounding. Was he here to talk? To make things right? Slowly, she stood up and opened the door. Liam stood there, his expression unreadable. He wasn't in his usual tailored suit. He was dressed casually, as if this was just another ordinary day. But in his hand, he held a stack of crisp white papers, her stomach twisted. "Sign these," he said flatly, holding out the divorce papers. Isabella stared at them, her fingers trembling as she took them. Her eyes scanned the legal terms, the cold, emotionless language spelling out the end of their marriage. Her heart squeezed painfully. This was real. This was really happening. She looked up at him, her voice barely a whisper. "You're really doing this?" Liam sighed, as if she was exhausting him. "Isabella, let's not drag this out. It's over." A sob threatened to break free from her chest. "Over?" She shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Liam, we stood in front of God, in front of our families, and promised to love each other forever. Where is that love? Where is the man who once told me I was his everything?" Liam's face remained stone cold. "That was a mistake." The words sliced through her like a blade. Her legs felt weak, and she clutched the papers, unable to hold back her tears anymore. "Please, Liam, don't do this. Don't throw away everything we built. I still love you." For a brief second, something flickered in his eyes. Guilt, hesitation, but just as quickly as it appeared, it vanished. He took a step back. "Love isn't enough, Isabella. I want a life that matches me. This marriage never should have happened." Her breath hitched. "I was your wife," he shrugged, "and now you won't be." She felt her whole body tremble. "Liam, look at me. Look me in the eyes and tell me you never loved me." Liam clenched his jaw, but said nothing. Tears streamed down her face. "Tell me," she begged. He exhaled sharply and turned away. "It doesn't matter anymore." And just like that, he walked past her, leaving her standing in the doorway, shattered beyond repair. Isabella collapsed to the floor, her sobs echoing through the empty house. She had given him her heart, and he had crushed it without a second thought. Hours later, Isabella sat at the dining table, staring at the divorce papers through tear-blurred eyes. Her fingers traced the ink where Liam's signature was already in place, so final, so absolute. She thought of the moments they had shared, the way he used to hold her close after a long day, the whispered "I love yous" before falling asleep, the dreams they had built together. Were they all lies? She picked up the pen, her fingers trembling. A part of her wanted to hold on, to fight. But how could she fight for a love that only she believed in? With a deep, shaky breath, she signed her name. The moment her pen left the paper, it was over. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she whispered, "Goodbye, Liam." She stood up, grabbed her suitcase, and walked toward the door. She didn't look back, because looking back would break her even more. Months had passed since the painful night Isabella walked out of Liam's house. No, not her house anymore. The divorce was finalized. Her name was no longer attached to his, and neither was her heart. She had spent weeks in mourning, crying over the love she lost, but eventually the tears dried up. She had no choice but to move forward. She had survived. Now, as she stood in front of the mirror, her reflection staring back at her in an elegant ivory wedding dress, she couldn't help but feel the weight of this moment. Her heart should have been racing with excitement, but instead A quiet fear gripped her. This wasn't a love marriage like last time. This was arranged. Her parents had introduced her to Daniel, a respected banker, well-mannered, kind, and polite. He was everything a husband should be, but could she trust another man with her heart? She closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. Not every man is Liam. A soft knock on the door pulled her out of her thoughts. Isabella? It was her mother's voice, warm and gentle. "Come in." Her mother stepped inside, her eyes filling with emotion at the sight of her daughter in a wedding gown once again. She walked over, adjusting Isabella's veil before softly saying, "Are you happy?" The question made Isabella pause. Happiness. She wasn't sure what that felt like anymore. But she wasn't broken either. "I think I will be," she whispered. Her mother smiled, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Daniel is a good man, my love. He will cherish you." Cherish, a word Liam had never truly understood. Isabella exhaled slowly. "I hope so." Her mother gave her one last reassuring squeeze before stepping back. "It's time." As Isabella walked down the aisle, a sense of calm settled over her. This wedding was different. No grand venue, no flashing cameras, no extravagant performances for the world to see. This was intimate, real. The moment her eyes met Daniel's, she felt something shift inside her. He wasn't like Liam. There was no arrogance in his gaze, no coldness, just warmth, reassurance, a silent promise that he wouldn't hurt her. Daniel smiled softly as she reached him. He gently took her hand, his touch steady and comforting. "You look beautiful," he murmured. A soft blush warmed her cheeks. She had almost forgotten what it felt like to be appreciated. As the officiant began speaking, Isabella glanced at Daniel again. His expression wasn't one of ownership or entitlement. It was devotion. When it was time for the vows, Daniel took a deep breath and held her hand a little tighter. "Isabella," he said, his voice steady and full of emotion, "I don't promise you a perfect life, but I promise to cherish you, to respect you, and to love you in all the ways you deserve." Her heart clenched. Cherish. He didn't just see her as a wife. He saw her as a woman, as a person who deserved to be valued. Her throat tightened as she whispered, "And I promise to be by your side through every high and every low." With those words, the past loosened its grip on her. The officiant smiled. "You may kiss the bride." Daniel leaned in, his lips hovering just above hers, as if asking for permission. It was gentle, sweet, and unlike any kiss she had ever received before. For the first time in years, Isabella felt safe. And for the first time since Liam had shattered her heart, she believed in love again. Later that evening, Isabella sat by the balcony of their hotel suite, gazing at the city lights. She felt Daniel's presence before he even spoke. "Penny, for your thoughts?" His voice was light-hearted, but there was genuine curiosity in it. She turned to him, searching his face for any hint of hidden cruelty, of false promises. But there was none. Only honesty. "I was just thinking about how different this feels," she admitted. Daniel tilted his head. "Different in a bad way?" She shook her head. "Number in a good way." He took a step closer, brushing a stray curl from her face. "I don't know what you've been through, Isabella, and I won't ask until you're ready to tell me. But I need you to know one thing." She swallowed. "What?" His eyes held hers with unwavering sincerity. "You will never have to beg for my love, because it is already yours." A tear slipped down her cheek, but this time it wasn't out of pain. It was hope. For the first time in a long time, Isabella allowed herself to believe maybe love wasn't an illusion after all. Italy was a dream. From the moment their plane landed in Venice, Isabella found herself in a world so beautiful, so enchanting, that for brief moments she almost forgot her past. The cobbled streets, the gentle lull of the gondolas gliding through the shimmering canals, and the scent of fresh pastries from nearby cafes filled the air with magic. Daniel had chosen Italy for their honeymoon, saying, "A place as beautiful as my wife deserves nothing less." His words had made her heart flutter, but deep down, a quiet fear still lingered. Would this honeymoon be different from her first one? Would this love be different? Their days were filled with exploration, hand-in-hand walks through the streets of Rome, visits to the historic Colosseum, and shared laughter over messy bites of gelato. But it was the nights that felt the most intimate. One evening, as they dined on the terrace of a candle-lit restaurant overlooking the Grand Canal, Isabella found herself watching Daniel instead of the breathtaking view. The way he swirled his wine, how he listened intently whenever she spoke, the warmth in his blue eyes whenever he looked at her. It was all so different from Liam. Liam had been intense, possessive, and selfish. His affection had been something to win, something conditional. But Daniel's love was effortless. It didn't need to be earned, it was simply given. As if sensing her gaze, he reached for her hand, rubbing soft circles on her palm. "You seem lost in thought, my love." She hesitated before admitting, "I'm not used to this." His brow furrowed. To what? To being treated like this. His fingers tightened around hers, his jaw clenching slightly, as if he understood more than she was willing to say. But instead of pressing her for answers, he simply lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a soft kiss to her knuckles. "You deserve all of this and more, Isabella." Her heart skipped a beat. That night back in their luxury suite, Isabella found herself staring at her reflection in the mirror. She was dressed in a silk nightgown, the soft fabric hugging her curves. Daniel was in the bedroom, waiting for her. This was supposed to be their first night together as husband and wife. Her hands trembled slightly as memories from the past resurfaced, nights of waiting in an empty bed, hoping for Liam to return home, only to wake up alone. A part of her longed to surrender to this new love, to finally feel cherished in the arms of a man who truly valued her. But another part of her was still afraid. Would Daniel change once he had her completely? Would his affection fade the way Liam's had? Taking a deep breath, she stepped out of the bathroom, her heart racing. Daniel was sitting on the edge of the bed, dressed in just his pajama pants, his toned chest illuminated by the dim lighting. He looked up as she entered, his gaze softening at the sight of her. "You're stunning," he murmured. She bit her lip, feeling her nerves intensify. Sensing her hesitation, he stood up and slowly approached her, keeping a respectable distance. He reached out, but instead of pulling her into his arms, he gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "Isabella, look at me." She lifted her eyes to meet his. "I can see the fear in your eyes. You don't have to explain, and I won't ask. But know this, I will never rush you. I will never take more than what you are willing to give." A lump formed in her throat. "Daniel!" He cupped her cheek, his thumb grazing her skin in the most delicate touch. "I'll wait for you, my love, no matter how long it takes." Tears welled up in her eyes. "You mean that?" He smiled, pressing a feather-light kiss to her forehead. "With all my heart." A deep warmth spread through her chest. For the first time in her life, she felt truly safe, loved, understood. As she lay in bed that night, Daniel's arms wrapped securely around her without expectation, she realized something. She had spent so long believing love was something she had to fight for, to chase, to endure pain for. But Daniel was showing her a different kind of love, one she didn't have to beg for, one she didn't have to suffer for, one that simply existed, patiently waiting for her to embrace it when she was ready. And for the first time, she believed. Maybe this time, love wouldn't break her. The honeymoon suite was bathed in a golden glow from the dimly lit lamps. The warmth of Italy's night breeze seeped through the open balcony doors, carrying the faint scent of blooming jasmine. Isabella stood near the bed, her heart pounding in her chest. The moment she had been dreading had finally arrived. Daniel stood a few feet away, his piercing blue eyes locked onto hers with an intensity that sent shivers down her spine. But there was no hunger in his gaze, no impatient demand. Only admiration. "Are you sure?" His voice was barely above a whisper, filled with nothing but patience. She swallowed hard. 1,000 emotions swirled inside her: fear, anticipation, vulnerability. But above all, there was trust. This was Daniel, not Liam. Liam, who had treated her like a decoration rather than a wife. Liam, who had ignored her touch and found comfort in others. Liam, who had thrown her away like she meant nothing. But Daniel was different. She nodded slowly. Yes. His smile was gentle as he reached for her, his hands sliding to her waist. He pulled her close, his warmth seeping into her skin. His lips brushed her forehead first, then her cheeks, trailing down to her jaw. Every touch felt like a silent promise. "I will cherish you." Her breath hitched as his fingers moved to the delicate straps of her nightgown. Slowly, he slid them down her shoulders, his touch feather-light, his movements unhurried, and then he froze. His hands lingered at the hem of her gown, his brows furrowing in confusion. He stepped back slightly, his eyes searching hers. "Isabella." His voice held something unfamiliar, shock, disbelief. "You're still a virgin." A sharp pain clenched her heart at his words. She lowered her gaze, ashamed of the truth that had haunted her for years. Tears welled up in her eyes as she whispered, "Liam never touched me." Daniel's breath hitched. He stepped back, running a hand through his hair as realization sank in. 3 years. You were married to him for 3 years. She nodded, the memories of her lonely nights washing over her like a tidal wave. "I waited for him every night, hoping he would come home to me. But he never did." Daniel's jaw tightened, his hands clenching into fists. "That bastard." A single tear slipped down her cheek. "I was never enough for him." Before she could say another word, Daniel was in front of her again, cradling her face between his hands. His touch was firm, but his eyes were heartbreakingly soft. "Isabella, listen to me." His voice was steady, full of conviction. "You were always enough. He was the fool who couldn't see it." A sob escaped her lips. "Then why did he—" Daniel silenced her with a kiss. It was slow, deep, and filled with emotions she had never felt before. Not possession, not obligation, but devotion. His hands moved carefully as if she were something fragile, something precious. And to him, she was. As he kissed away her tears, his lips brushed against her ear. "I will show you what love truly means." A shiver ran down her spine. Not from fear, but from the overwhelming warmth of being cherished. For the first time, Isabella felt something she had never known in her first marriage. She felt wanted. Daniel didn't rush. He took his time, worshipping every inch of her, whispering soft words of reassurance between every touch. She wasn't just experiencing passion, she was experiencing love. The kind of love that didn't demand, didn't take, but simply gave. And as she lay in his arms afterward, his fingers tracing soothing patterns on her bare skin, Isabella realized something. This was how it was supposed to be. Not loneliness, not rejection, not silent tears in an empty bed. Love was meant to heal, And Daniel, he was her healing. Isabella woke up to the scent of fresh coffee and warm pastries. Sunlight poured through the balcony doors, casting a golden glow across the hotel suite. The sheets around her were soft, but the warmth that truly enveloped her came from the man lying beside her. Daniel, her husband, her lover, her everything. She turned her head slightly and found him already watching her, his blue eyes filled with something she had never seen before. Pure, unfiltered adoration. "Good morning, my love." His voice was husky, still laced with sleep. A blush crept up her cheeks as last night's memories came rushing back. The way he had touched her, cherished her, loved her in a way she never thought possible. He reached out and traced a finger along her jawline, tilting her chin up. "You're even more beautiful in the morning." She laughed softly, trying to hide her face in the pillow, but he wouldn't let her. Gently, he pulled her into his arms, his lips brushing against her forehead. "Stay right here. I have something for you." He got up, leaving her in the warmth of the bed. Moments later, he returned with a tray, steaming coffee, fresh croissants, and a plate of sliced strawberries. Her heart swelled. "You did all this?" He winked, setting the tray in front of her. "Of course. My wife deserves the best." As she sipped her coffee, he sat beside her, watching her every move like she was the most precious thing in the world. "Isabella," he murmured, running his fingers through her hair. "I love you." Her breath hitched. Love. She had spent years longing to hear those words from Liam, and they had never come. But with Daniel, they didn't just sound real, they felt real. Tears welled up in her eyes as she whispered, "I love you too." His lips captured hers in a kiss so deep, so filled with longing, that she felt herself melt into him. The next few days in Italy were nothing short of magical. Daniel took her on romantic boat rides through the canals of Venice, his arms wrapped around her as they watched the sunset together. He surprised her with spontaneous kisses at the bustling street markets, in quiet bookstores, even in the middle of a crowded cafe. One night, as they walked hand in hand along the beach, he suddenly twirled her in his arms. "Dance with me," he whispered. There was no music, just the sound of waves crashing against the shore. But as he pulled her close, pressing soft kisses along her neck, Isabella realized she didn't need music. She only needed him. Back in their suite, the air between them grew heavier, charged with unspoken desire. Daniel pulled her onto the bed, his hands trailing along her skin like he was memorizing every inch of her. "You have no idea how long I've waited for you," he murmured, his lips tracing a path down her collarbone. She shivered beneath his touch. "Then don't wait any more." That was all the invitation he needed. Their bodies intertwined, moving in perfect harmony. There was no rush, no demand, only passion, only love. He made her feel things she had never felt before, wanted, cherished, desired, and as she lay in his arms afterward, completely spent and utterly happy, she realized something profound. She had spent years believing she wasn't enough, that she wasn't beautiful enough, wanted enough, worthy enough, but Daniel had shattered every doubt with his love. She was enough, and she always had been. The morning air was crisp, the scent of fresh roses filling the bedroom, as Isabella stood near the window, holding the small pregnancy test in her trembling hands. 2 pink lines. Her breath caught in her throat, her heart pounded wildly. She was pregnant. A mix of emotions swirled inside her: joy, disbelief, nervous excitement. For years she had imagined this moment, but not like this. Not with Liam. With him, Pregnancy had been a distant, unfulfilled dream, a dream he had crushed with cruel words. "You're brown-skinned, Isabella. If I try to get you pregnant, our kids will look like you." Painful memories surfaced, but she pushed them away. That life was gone. This was different. Daniel was different. Tears welled up in her eyes as she placed a hand on her flat stomach, already feeling a deep bond with the tiny life growing inside her. She had to tell him. She found him in the kitchen, humming a soft tune as he made breakfast. His messy hair, the sleeves of his white shirt rolled up, and the way he moved so effortlessly, it all made her heart ache with love. She clutched the pregnancy test in her hand, unable to hold back her excitement. "Daniel!" He turned around, smiling at her, but as he saw the tears in her eyes, his expression turned serious. "What's wrong, my love?" She bit her lip, holding up the test. "I'm pregnant." For a second, silence filled the room. Then, in one swift motion, Daniel lifted her off the ground, twirling her in the air as laughter bubbled from his lips. "We're having a baby." His voice was filled with pure, unfiltered joy. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Yes." He hugged her tightly, pressing his forehead against hers. "I love you, Isabella. I love you so much." Dropping to his knees, he placed both hands on her stomach, his lips brushing against the small bump that would soon grow. "Hey there, little one," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "You have no idea how much your daddy loves you already." Isabella's heart swelled. For the first time in her life, she felt what true happiness was. The next few months were filled with nothing but love and excitement. Daniel treated her like a queen, bringing her breakfast in bed, massaging her feet when they ached, and constantly talking to her growing belly. "Our baby will have your beautiful smile," he would say. Or, "I hope they have your heart, Isabella, because you are the most loving person I know." Every night he wrapped his arms around her, his hands resting protectively on her stomach, whispering stories to their unborn child. She had never known love like this. At their ultrasound appointment, Isabella lay on the examination table, Daniel holding her hand tightly. The doctor moved the probe across her belly, and suddenly the screen showed two tiny figures. Daniel's jaw dropped. "Wait, are those—" The doctor smiled. "Congratulations. You're having twins." Tears filled Isabella's eyes as she looked at Daniel. "Twins?" He let out a breathless laugh, kissing her forehead. "We're going to have 2 babies, my love." His hands trembled as he touched her belly, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "I can't believe it. We're so blessed." Isabella squeezed his hand. "We really are." 9 months later, in the warmth of a hospital room, Isabella lay exhausted but happy, holding 2 tiny bundles in her arms. 2 perfect, beautiful babies, both with porcelain-white skin, Daniel's piercing blue eyes, and tiny, delicate fingers that wrapped around her own. Daniel sat beside her, his eyes full of wonder as he gazed at his newborn children. He kissed Isabella's forehead, whispering, "Thank you for giving me this beautiful family." Tears slipped down her cheeks. "They're our miracle." As Daniel held one baby close to his chest, rocking gently, he whispered, "I will love and protect you both forever." Watching him, Isabella knew this was the life she was meant to have, a life full of love, respect, and a happiness that no one could take away, and she would never let her past haunt her again. She had found her true home in Daniel's arms, and in the tiny, perfect faces of their children. The grand ballroom was illuminated with golden chandeliers, their glow reflecting off the polished marble floors. Waiters dressed in crisp uniforms weaved through the elegantly dressed guests, offering champagne and delicate hors d'oeuvres. It was a night of power and prestige, an exclusive business gala attended by the city's wealthiest and most influential people. Among them was Liam Carter. Dressed in a sleek black tuxedo, he exuded confidence as he sipped his whiskey, exchanging business deals and flirtatious glances with the elite women around him. Nothing had changed. He was still the arrogant, heartless man he had always been, at least that's what he thought, until his world stopped. His grip on his glass tightened, his breath caught in his throat as he saw her. Isabella. She walked into the ballroom beside Daniel, her delicate hand wrapped around his arm, her beauty radiant and impossible to ignore. She wore a breathtaking red gown that hugged her curves, her skin glowing under the soft lights. Her long, dark hair cascaded down her back, her makeup subtly highlighting her striking features. But what stunned Liam the most was the confidence in her posture, the quiet power in her gaze. This wasn't the woman he had discarded. She was different now, stronger, happier, untouchable. And in her arms she carried something even more shocking. 2 beautiful, white-skinned babies. Liam's world tilted. His mind screamed in disbelief as he took a step closer, his eyes darting between Isabella and the children she cradled protectively. White. Both of them had porcelain skin, his color. How was this possible? Liam's arrogant smirk vanished. He felt his stomach twist, his heartbeat accelerating in his chest. He had rejected Isabella, telling her she wasn't good enough, that her brown skin would taint their children's appearance. Yet here she stood, glorious, radiant, and holding the proof that he had been wrong. His hands clenched into fists as jealousy and regret surged through him. He had spent the past few years drowning in women, in meaningless pleasures, believing Isabella had faded into nothingness. But she hadn't. She had risen, and she had found the happiness that he had denied her. A lump formed in his throat as he slowly approached her. Isabella. His voice was softer than he intended, filled with an emotion he wasn't used to, desperation. Isabella turned to face him. She felt a sharp jolt in her heart. Seeing Liam again after all these years should have hurt, but it didn't, because now he was nothing to her. She lifted her chin, her expression unreadable. Liam. His name rolled off her tongue with no warmth, no longing, just cold recognition. His eyes darted to the babies in her arms, his voice barely above a whisper. "Are they yours?" She smiled, a soft, victorious smile that cut deeper than any insult ever could. "Yes, mine and Daniel's." Liam swallowed hard. His gaze flickered to the twins. They were perfect. A boy and a girl, their tiny faces filled with innocence, their white skin, their light brown curls, their blue eyes, Daniel's eyes. Liam's gut twisted with something ugly. He had convinced himself she would never be happy without him, that no man would cherish her, but he had been wrong, painfully, irrevocably wrong. Liam forced a smile, his confidence crumbling beneath his regret. You look incredible, Isabella." She simply nodded, unfazed. "Thank you." Daniel stepped forward, wrapping an arm protectively around her waist. "Is there something you need, Carter?" His voice was firm, unwavering. Liam ignored the sharp stab of possessiveness that ran through him at the sight of another man, claiming Isabella. A better man. He tried again. "I made mistakes, Isabella. She cut him off, her voice steady. "You didn't make mistakes, Liam. You made choices." His breath hitched. Her eyes bore into his, unyielding, unapologetic. "And I made mine." He had expected anger, maybe bitterness, but there was nothing, no pain, no sorrow, only indifference. And that was the most painful thing of all. Liam had once held power over her emotions. He had been the center of her world. Now, he was just a shadow of her past. Daniel pressed a soft kiss to Isabella's forehead, looking at her with so much love that it made Liam sick. That was supposed to be me, but it never would be. Not anymore. Liam watched as Isabella turned away from him, walking hand in hand with the man who had given her everything he never did. As they disappeared into the crowd, Liam stood there, drowning in a regret so heavy it suffocated him. He had lost her. Forever. Liam stood frozen, his whiskey glass trembling in his grip as he watched the scene unfold before him. At a quiet table near the grand ballroom's balcony, Isabella sat with Daniel and their two beautiful babies. She laughed, a soft, joyful sound that wrapped around Liam's chest like a vice. It wasn't just laughter. It was happiness. A kind of happiness he had never seen in her before. Daniel leaned in, pressing a lingering kiss to Isabella's temple, his fingers playfully tickling one of the babies in her arms. The child giggled, a tiny sound of innocence and love, and Liam felt a sharp stab to his heart. That should have been me. His stomach twisted, his pulse racing as he gripped the edge of the bar for support. He had spent 3 years with Isabella, treating her like she was nothing, pushing her aside for meaningless affairs. He had mocked her, broken her, abandoned her, and yet she had moved on, not just moved on, flourished, and now she had everything he never knew he wanted. Liam took a slow sip of whiskey, his throat burning as he swallowed. But the ache in his chest didn't fade. His mind screamed at him to look away, but he couldn't. Every small gesture between Isabella and Daniel felt like a dagger, straight into his gut. Daniel reached out, brushing a stray curl from Isabella's face. She smiled up at him, her eyes shimmering with love. That love used to be mine. His breathing grew uneven as he watched Daniel lift one of the babies into his arms, gently bouncing the child while pressing a kiss to its soft forehead. Liam's entire body tensed. That should have been my child. He clenched his fists, his nails digging into his palm as realization crashed into him. He had everything he ever wanted right in front of him years ago, and he had thrown it away. Liam's mind raced back to the past. He remembered Isabella waiting up for him late at night, her eyes filled with love and hope, a hope he crushed over and over again. He remembered the countless candlelight dinners she had prepared, only for him to never show up. He remembered her standing in their bedroom doorway, tears streaming down her face as she had asked, "Why are you doing this to me?" And he remembered the cruelest words he had ever spoken. "You're brown-skinned, Isabella. We have no match. If I get you pregnant, our kids will look like you." His stomach churned. The memory hit like a wrecking ball, shattering what little pride he had left. Because now, staring at Isabella's white-skinned, beautiful babies, he realized something that made him sick to his core. He had been wrong, so painfully, devastatingly wrong. The very thing he had feared, the idea of having children with her, was now his greatest regret. Because those babies could have been his, and he had let her go. Liam turned away, gripping the railing of the balcony, struggling to breathe. The air felt too thick, the weight in his chest unbearable. For years he had told himself he didn't need her, that she wasn't worth his loyalty, that she would never find a love greater than what he had to offer. But now, watching her in Daniel's arms, glowing with happiness, holding the perfect family he had denied her, he knew he had lost the only woman who had ever truly loved him, and he would never get her back. Regret settled deep in his bones, cold and suffocating. This was his punishment. To watch her love another man. To watch his perfect family live a life that should have been his, and to know that he had no one to blame but himself. Liam's head snapped up as he heard Isabella's soft laughter again. She turned toward Daniel, her hand resting gently on his chest as she whispered something that made him smile. Then, right in front of Liam's eyes, Daniel cupped her face and kissed her. Deep, slow, loving. Liam's heart clenched. That was his final punishment, to know that he had once owned her heart, and now it belonged to someone else. Forever. The night air was crisp, the stars scattered across the sky like diamonds, but Liam felt none of its beauty. His heart pounded as he stood outside Isabella's house, his hands clammy, his throat dry. This wasn't just a house. It was a home, a place filled with warmth, love, and the happiness he had once taken for granted. He took a shaky breath and rang the doorbell. A few moments later, the door opened, and there she was. Isabella stood before him, wearing a simple blue dress, her long hair cascading over her shoulders. Her beauty was just as breathtaking as he remembered, but something was different. Her eyes. There was no longing, no pain, just indifference. The realization hit him like a brick. She had moved on, but he wasn't ready to accept that. Not yet. "Liam?" Isabella's voice was calm, but there was no warmth in it. Liam swallowed hard, his voice breaking. "I made a terrible mistake." She didn't react. She simply crossed her arms, waiting. Panic surged through him. He needed to make her understand. He took a step closer, his eyes pleading. "I threw away the best thing that ever happened to me. I thought I needed more, but I was blind. Isabella, please, give me one more chance." Her expression didn't change. His chest tightened. So he did something he had never done before. He dropped to his knees. "Please?" His voice was hoarse, desperate. "I regret everything." The great Liam Carter, the ruthless millionaire who had once treated her like she was disposable, was now on his knees before her, begging. For a moment, silence stretched between them. Then Isabella sighed. Liam. His heart leaped with hope. Maybe, just maybe, she would forgive him. But then her next words shattered him. "You regret losing me. Not because you love me, but because you lost control over me." Liam's breath hitched. "That's not true." She tilted her head. "Isn't it?" He opened his mouth to protest, but she wasn't finished. "Tell me, Liam, would you be here if my life had fallen apart? If I was miserable without you? Would you want me back if I was broken?" He flinched, because he knew the answer, and so did she. "You don't love me," Isabella continued. "You just can't stand the fact that I don't need you anymore." Her words were a knife to his soul, and the worst part. She was right. Liam's throat tightened. "I can change. No." Isabella's voice was gentle but firm. "I don't want you to change for me one day." Tears burned at the back of his eyes as he searched her face for even a glimmer of the love they once had. But there was nothing. Isabella had let him go. For good. Behind her, Daniel appeared in the doorway, holding one of their babies in his arms. His gaze locked onto Liam's, protective and unwavering. Liam felt sick. That should have been me. But it wasn't. And it never would be. Isabella stepped back, her hand resting on Daniel's arm. "Go home, Liam." The finality in her voice crushed him. She wasn't coming back. With one last hollow look at the life he had lost, Liam turned away, his heart aching with a regret that would never leave him. As the door closed behind him, Liam realized something. Some mistakes can never be undone. Some love stories don't get second chances, and the worst kind of loss is the one you caused yourself. Liam stood frozen on the doorstep, his entire world crumbling around him. He had thought he could fix this, thought that if he begged hard enough, if he poured his heart out, Isabella would forgive him. But the way she looked at him now, calm, unmoved, untouchable, told him everything. He had lost her forever. Isabella stared at the man who had once destroyed her, the man who had made her feel worthless, the man who had mocked her love, humiliated her, and walked away without a second thought. Yet, looking at him now, pathetic, desperate, drowning in regret, she felt nothing. No love, no pain, just peace. Because she was no longer the broken woman he had abandoned. She had found her strength, her happiness, her worth, and she was never giving them up again. Liam's voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. "Isabella, please, just one last chance." She met his gaze, her expression unreadable. Then, in the calmest voice she had ever used with him, she said the words that sealed his fate. "You threw me away like I was nothing. Now I know my worth." Liam's breath hitched. Each word felt like a dagger to his heart. Because she was right, he had thrown her away, and now he would spend the rest of his life wishing he could undo it. Isabella turned away, not sparing him another glance. Instead, she reached for Daniel's hand, the man who had picked up the broken pieces of her heart and made her whole again, the man who had shown her what real love was. With a soft smile, she intertwined her fingers with his. Then together they walked inside, closing the door behind them. And just like that, Liam was shut out of her life, forever. Liam took a shaky breath, staring at the closed door. He wanted to scream, to pound on it until she let him back in, but he knew she never would. His chest tightened, the weight of regret pressing down on him like a crushing tide. This was his punishment, to live every single day knowing he had once held the rarest kind of love in his hands, and he had thrown it away. Now she was happy without him, and he was left with nothing but his regret. Liam slowly stepped back, his heart hammering, his vision blurring. He had once believed he was above pain, above heartbreak. Now he was the one left shattered, alone, regretful, and completely, utterly lost. As he walked away, the night air felt colder than ever, because tonight he lost the only woman who had ever truly loved him, and there was no going back. Inside the house, Isabella took a deep breath, feeling lighter than she ever had. Daniel kissed her forehead gently. "Are you okay?" She smiled, wrapping her arms around him. "I've never been better." Because for the first time in her life, she had won. And Liam Carter was nothing but a forgotten memory. The golden rays of the morning sun streamed through the bedroom window, casting a soft glow over Isabella's peaceful world. She lay in bed, her head resting on Daniel's chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. Beside them, in a cozy white crib, their two beautiful babies slept soundly, their tiny chests rising and falling in perfect harmony. A warmth spread through Isabella's heart as she reached out, gently brushing a curl from her daughter's forehead. This was love. Not the kind that was built on promises that shattered, not the kind that made her feel less than, but the kind that healed, nurtured, and cherished her. The kind she had always deserved. Daniel stirred beside her, his arm instinctively pulling her closer. You're awake?" His voice was husky from sleep, sending a pleasant shiver down her spine. She turned her head, meeting his soft blue eyes. "Just watching our babies." A lazy smile spread across Daniel's face as he followed her gaze. He reached out, running his fingers gently over his son's tiny hand. "They're perfect," he murmured, "just like their mother." Isabella blushed, warmth flooding her chest. "You always say that." "Because it's true." He pulled her closer, kissing her forehead with a tenderness that made her heart ache in the best way. It was in these quiet, ordinary moments that Isabella realized the true depth of love. not in grand gestures or expensive gifts, but in the way Daniel looked at her, in the way he listened, in the way he made her feel safe, adored, and cherished. This was forever. As Daniel rocked their daughter in his arms, Isabella felt an overwhelming surge of emotion. She remembered the cruel words Liam had once thrown at her. "You're brown-skinned, Isabella. We have no match. Our children will never be white like me." And yet, here she was, holding two white-skinned, beautiful babies in her arms, not because their skin color mattered, but because love didn't care about such things. Love was not about skin. It was about kindness, respect, and devotion. And Daniel had shown her all of that and more. Isabella smiled, resting her head against his shoulder as he continued rocking their child. "I've finally found what real love is," she whispered. Daniel pressed a soft kiss to her hair, whispering back, "And you'll be forever loved." As their babies stirred in their sleep, Isabella closed her eyes, letting herself soak in the happiness she had once thought impossible. She had walked through pain, betrayal, and heartbreak. She had faced the darkest nights of her life, but in the end, she had found her light. A light that never dimmed, a love that never wavered. And as Daniel held her close, their babies safe in their arms, she knew she had won. Because real love wasn't about color, it was about the heart. And Isabella's heart was finally home.